Anybody ever been sort of tormented by that incessant desire to improve oneself? It almost seems like it's hardwired into these bodies. Like, I just have to make myself, get rid of these bad habits and, learn some new skills and be a better person and, self-improvement. So we can sort of speculate where that sort of built-in, very common tendency comes from. And, maybe it comes from, childhood when our parents perhaps sort of projected a life ahead of us and, that there would be, ever happier moments in the future, as long as you worked hard and did the right things and got good grades, etc. So that sense of performance of, becoming worthy of, be a better person. Might also be come from a sense of, the American dream. Things were always going to be better in the future somehow. Things were always looking up, growing, becoming more, becoming better, as we move into the future. The sense of movement from what I am now towards something improved, an improved version of me. There's that sense, I think, whether the American dream is still alive or not, I think there's still that hope, at least, that, or perhaps memory, that movement is very, very common in this country. Or the motivation might just be, trying to, discard my dysfunctional conditioning. That can be also, I just want to not be controlled by things that seem to control my behavior in ways that don't really serve me. So I want to improve my way out of it. I want to fix myself. I want to fix my habit. So it feels like there's this quite common movement of wanting this sort of constant pressure to sort of improve this structure, right? This body-mind. And, to be fair, there's some payoffs there. It's not like it doesn't have payoffs. I mean, that's why it's so popular, right? If we, clean up our act and learn to interact better with other people, play nice, work hard, be honest and fair. I mean, there's a number of things that pay off, right? And pay off in terms of income or, social standing or the kinds of friends we have. I mean, there is a payoff there. So we can acknowledge that. And but the only question is whether this whole movement of self-improvement has anything to do with self-realization, which is what we're talking about here, right? Okay, so we're not denying the benefits, and if that's our goal in life, to just to have a more comfortable life, to have a more affluent life, better health, nicer friends, live in a better community. Great, wonderful, no issues. It all depends on what we really want, and we don't have to give up, being able to function in the world in order to investigate this question about who we truly are. We don't need to, give away all our money. We don't need to go live in a cave. We don't need to renounce everything. We don't need to be an ascetic. We don't need to do that, because there are issues with that path. If that path worked, wonderful. We'd all be doing it. well, probably not all of us, but some of us would be doing it. But the question really comes down to the hint of the difficulty here of whether self-improvement is related to self-realization. The hint comes in the term of self-improvement, right? So the term itself raises the question, well, what's the self that we're trying to improve, right? And then the other question that's related is, um, does what is essentially living this life require improvement? We've been told it does, but does it really? So these are two sort of fundamental questions. What is the self that we're trying to improve, and is it necessary? So one of the assumptions that are made is that what we typically refer to as, my personal self, who I am, sort of casually speaking, um, is this body mind? And when we talk about self-improvement, that's actually what we're talking about, improving this body mind, right? Teaching it new skills, um, new mental capacities, new behaviors, new ways of interacting with people, those kinds of skills, which all have to do with this body mind. And again, there's no problem with any of that. But the question is that improvement of this structure, this organism, is it related to awakening? Is it related to understanding what we essentially are? And well, the simple answer to that is no, it's not. It's not related at all. And the reason that we can say that so categorically is that this realization of what we truly are is the recognition of what we are already. Whereas this whole idea of self-improvement has everything to do with becoming something that we're not now, right? So they live in separate universes, they're two different movements altogether. Um, and we may find ourselves looking, you know, to the ways this body mind moves in the world initially, maybe for a long time, seeking to find what we truly are in this world of form, right? This world of the body, mind, accomplishments, experiences, sensations, relationships, etc. And that's also good, also fine. We don't need to deny um, the beauty and allure of the world of form. It's amazing, fantastic, and um, you know, for all of us, especially, you know, at a as we begin to explore the world, it's all very exciting and interesting and alluring, and we almost can't help ourselves, just going in that direction, and that's as it should be. Um, and then maybe at some point we um, wonder if everything that we've experienced in life is if that is all there is, because it's not all fun and games, as you may have noticed. There's some challenges out there too, some difficulties, some real hardships in some cases, trauma. So we may find ourselves questioning, um, how to go about um, finding out what this self really is. And that's the beginning of an investigation. And when we start down that path, there's a lot of suggestions about how to go about that, right? We can be told to change our diet, meditate, how to meditate, um, you know, ideas to adopt, become more compassionate, become more loving to our neighbor, do good deeds, um, um, you know, all kinds of actions, adopt new theologies, all kinds of things that, um, are suggestions out there about how to approach this self that we're trying to improve, right? What that's about. So there can easily be this sense of, um, you know, it, like has worked in other ways in our lifetime where, we get good at something and there's some rewards and we get better at it and there are more rewards. And so there's almost a linearity to that. And we sort of expect the same thing to do in this investigation of ourself is that, when we begin to meditate or we begin to explore new, I don't know, spiritual um, ideas, there can be a, real uplifting of spirit. It can feel really good. And then we can begin to believe, well, this sort of works in the same way that it worked in my worldly life. I mean, things will just continue to get better and better, and I'll get to a higher and higher state. And one day I'll get to such a high state that that'll be awake. That'll be enlightenment, right? That'll be the recognition of what I truly am. But it doesn't actually work like that, because it's not an accumulation of good feelings. It's not even the accumulation of good ideas. It's the recognition of what is um, there to notice all of that. Prior to whatever feelings may arise, good, bad, indifferent, prior to whatever ideas may arise, prior to whatever feelings may arise, it's not about having the proper feelings, the right ideas. So this movement to improve this body mind, like I say, it's fine, no worries. The only difficulty is if we believe that improvement is in the direction of self-realization, because then in a sense we've put up a barrier in front of us that we then feel like we have to make our way through. And the barrier might be, well, if I was just a better meditator, or if my mind wasn't so busy, or if I didn't have all those negative emotions, or if, so that we go to work on those things as if, once I solve that problem, then I'll be eligible, right? I'm getting closer. If I work on those things, then certainly I'll be closer, right? But it doesn't seem to work that way, because that whole movement is again about this body mind, how this body mind operates, and we all know, may not tend to dwell on it that much, but deep down we all know that these forms are temporary. So however much we improve them, at the end of the day, all of that will be taken away one day, sooner or later. So it raises the question of how much of our time and energy during this lifetime are we going to spend to improve this impermanent form, this body mind. If we're interested in spirituality and interested in finding out what this life is truly about, and we think that the pathway is the improvement of this body mind, then we have a lifetime of work ahead of us, a never-ending process of improvement, always more to do, always the next issue to solve. Right? So it may be worth, rather than, spending a lifetime pursuing that avenue, is to just stop for a moment and ask, well, do I know that's true? Do I know that that is indeed the path? I know a lot of people say that it is. A lot of the literature says that's, give all kinds of ways to approach that. But if I were to investigate it for myself, where would I start? Where would I start if I was trying to find the most direct way, the most time efficient way? Where would you start? And what I suggest is start with the few things that we can know for sure. There aren't many. It's not a long list. I can think of three. One is a sense of I am. Right? I may not know what that I is, but there's no doubt that there's something here that exists. There's some sense of beingness, right? Not just here for everyone. We refer to it 1,000 times a day. I did this, I thought that. That sense of beingness, of being present. And it's undeniable, right? We literally cannot say, I am not, right? We'd have to exist to deny our existence, right? So there's something fundamentally that exists. We may not understand it at all. We may not be able to even describe it very well. We may not be able to pinpoint what this I is or what this sense of beingness is, but we can be absolutely certain when we say I am. As soon as we add anything after the I am, then it doesn't become true anymore. I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm this old, I'm whatever. It may be an aspect of what we are, but it's not, it's a limitation on the totality of what we are. So what's most true is just the statement I am. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing that we can notice is that everything that we've ever experienced in our entire life, all of us, has only ever happened within the awareness that you are. So we may not understand what that awareness is. We may not be able to describe it. We certainly can't get a good look at it as an object because it's what's noticing whatever happens. Right? But we can notice that it is always present for whatever we've ever experienced in our entire life. We've never experienced anything outside of our awareness. Even when we look up at the stars, that still too is happening within our awareness. So that's the second thing that we can be quite certain of. And the third thing is that everything happens in the present moment. Right? Again, no one has ever managed to be anywhere other than in the present moment. Right? Even if you time traveled, wherever you ended up, whatever, year you ended up with, it would be the present moment. That would be your experience. It would be now. So everything that we ever remember, recollect from the past, we can only bring that into consciousness in the present moment. Anything that we can ever think about the future, we can only do that in the present moment. So those three things, that sense of I am, sense of everything happening within this field of awareness, and everything happening always in this present moment. So I'd suggest that's what we can go on. Those are, sort of solid ground. It may not feel that solid compared to a good idea or a belief, but at least they all can be confirmed in our own direct experience. We don't need to take anybody else's word for it, because we can experience all of those things easily ourselves. So that's what we have to go on, and that has implications, right? It's not founded on belief. It's not founded on a belief that what I'm doing now will earn me a ticket into heaven. It's not, a belief that, I'm doing this good deed to fix my karma so I'll have a better birth in the next lifetime. That may or may not be true, who knows? But I would say that it is, as far as we're concerned in this moment, it's a belief, right? So do we go with something we can believe, or do we go with something that we can verify for ourselves in our own direct experience without taking anybody's word for it? It's a sense of I am, sense of awareness, sense of being present in this moment. And so those observations of how life is has implications, right? One of the implications is that whatever it is that we essentially are must be present now. If everything happens in this present moment, and this sense of beingness is present now, this I am, and what we essentially are is as present in this moment as any other moment. And that frees us from waiting for that spectacular moment, sometime in the future, of course, where everything will fall into place. If we can see that what we essentially are must be present now in this moment and every moment, then we're not waiting for some future moment. We can investigate, well, what's present now? What's that? Right? We can also look at what doesn't change. So we can see everything that we can look at in life, think about, do, experience. It's all subject to change, coming and going, arising, departing. Except one thing, and that is this innate capacity of awareness to be present for all of it, to notice all of it, to be aware of whatever it is that is arising. So we can choose, where do we want to look for our essential identity, sort of the shifting sands of our experiences, this body, or do we want to look in the direction of what doesn't change? And what doesn't change, the only thing that doesn't change, is awareness. The contents change, of course, no doubt, right? And when we say it doesn't change, it sounds like, well, what is it? Sort of inert? No, it's an alive, present, self-aware. But it has, since it has um, no form, the form is what changes. The capacity to be present for all form is what doesn't change. So we can choose where to look for this self-realization. You know, is it in the form of improving this body-mind? Is that where it's at? This temporary entity that may even be a fictitious entity, that there's not actually a separate, independent, separate self there? Is that what we want to work on, spend our time and energy on? Or would it be more fruitful to look more and more deeply at what is um, more fundamental than the content, the underlying context, you could say, in which all of that happens. So when we hear something like that, we can, it can be dismissed. There's something in our culture, I think, that tends to distrust the idea of getting something from nothing. Like, wait a minute, are you saying that this, who we truly are is already the case? We didn't have to earn it? That sounds suspect, right? I think it's sort of built into our culture, sort of, be suspicious of the salesman who's offering something too good to be true. The other sort of related element to that is this sense of whether you were brought up in a particular religion in this country or not, there's a sense of original sin, right? Sort of somehow not quite enough from the get-go. Somehow flawed, somehow, guilty until proven innocent. Having to earn our sort of right to be here in this life, to earn our worthiness. Right? Anybody ever felt like that? I'm not talking about, any specific religion. I'm just talking that sense, I think, has been sort of seeped into our culture, that somehow this work ethic, or that we somehow have to earn this worthiness, right? So when someone comes along and says, you are already that which you seek, right? That inherent awakeness is already the case. And, it can sound grandiose to American ears. It can sound almost heretical, like, no, that can't be right. That can't be true. Not me. Maybe some other person, but not me. Not with all these flaws and failures, and I have to earn it, right? I have to earn my worthiness. I have to earn my right to exist in this lifetime, to feel good about myself. Right? Anybody ever feel like that? Work our way up to just sort of the right to exist, right to be here in this lifetime, right to feel okay about oneself. So I'm suggesting there's sort of this built-in bias towards unworthiness, a cultural thing. It's not all people, but it seems to be true often for many people in this country. So this movement of sort of improving this self, this body mind, like I say, there's some benefits. It's not a bad thing. It's just it's unrelated to waking up. So as this body mind sort of moves about in the world, it can feel vulnerable. It can feel like I'm just trying to make my way. I'm just trying to get by. Um, and with that feeling, it's hard to sort of correlate that feeling with this idea of what I truly am is um, pure awareness, beyond harm, at peace, content. It's hard to correlate those two things. And it's not that we can do it just by sheer sort of mental effort. It just doesn't work like that. There's a sense of if this spiritual thing was really working, I would just feel better and better. I mean, isn't that how it should work? No, no. It's Adyashanti calls his path the path of failure. Failing again and again and again, to the point that we give up on this sense of improvement. Things are getting better, accumulating merit, and accumulating spiritual experiences, ideas, growing. It can feel like that for a while, but as we get further and further along on it, it can feel like those crutches, in a sense, are taken away. And we're left with the, almost like a nakedness of our own being, just um, just that sheer beingness, without any sort of ideology or hope or expectation to land on. I remember pursuing spirituality with considerable energy for, I don't know, 7 years maybe, late 90s into early 2000s. And the night or the day before, I had a shift that stuck, that was abiding. In those days, I was out in Oregon. I was doing land development, and I was walking around on a piece of property that had been approved for construction, but the construction hadn't started yet. It was still, some woods and fields, and but the construction was just about to start, and trees would be torn down and roads built, etc. And I remember just walking around. It was sort of an odd day. It was in February. It was chilly, foggy, but very, very still. And I remember walking down a hill into some brushy area, and I just stopped at some point and was just standing there for a long time. And in this little bush that was maybe, I don't know, 8 or 10 feet away from me, as I was standing there, was a little tiny bird flew into the bush, and I found out later it was a ruby-crowned kinglet. and never saw one before or since. Um, but that bird was in that one bush, it was a fairly large bush, but for 20 minutes while I just stood there watching it. And my sense in watching it, this is a little tiny bird, smaller than a goldfinch, a little tiny bird. And my sense of it was that um, here I was, this sort of plodding developer about to tear down many trees to build streets and roads and houses. Um, and here's this bird surviving in the middle of February, um, just on the barest minimum, just the lightest touch in how it was presented itself to the world. And I was humiliated because this had been my life for 20 years at that point. And I was deeply humiliated by this little tiny bird. And so sometimes when, all can feel lost, I mean, utterly lost, it can feel like all of these years of effort of spirituality has led to this total, utter failure. And it's sometimes almost, something dramatic may be needed to just take away, the last remnants of, one's hopes and dreams and ideas and beliefs and everything, and just leave you standing there naked in your own beingness. And then for the first time, you're sort of vulnerable enough to see what has been there the entire time. Watching, being present for. We ignored it, It's not that we never saw it, we just ignored its significance. And it's not that none of us have seen it. All of us have seen it many times and dismissed it many times until one day when we don't. One day when we just recognize the significance of it and it hits us like a board across the head. Oh, that. So this isn't this movement, from a personal separate self. It can feel like, well, this self-improvement thing should work, in spirituality, just like it does in the rest of the world. And it's, we go down that path as long as we've got the energy to do it. But at some point, um, we can feel so utterly defeated that we just can't be induced to chase the rabbit around the track one more time. It's like it's not the next strategy. We're just out of strategies, and we're just left um, in our innate beingness. And in that starkness, often something is seen. So this movement, isn't about becoming more aware. And I know that term is used a lot in spirituality, but it's not that at all. The awareness is just fine. The awareness is complete already. Couldn't be improved upon. It's just as magnificent as it could possibly be. What does change is the degree to which our mind um, obscures that, obscures it with um, the next idea, the next concept, the next imaginary adventure, the next memory, the next hope, etc. That's what obscures it. It's not that Again, it's not that thinking is bad. Thinking can be very useful sometimes, but um, when we're in search of what we truly are, all of that mental process to try to figure it out is entirely in this world of form. It's to try to figure out how this body mind can get where I want to go. In the meantime, everything is just fine. Always has been. Couldn't be otherwise. It doesn't do any good until we recognize that for ourselves. But that's actually the truth of it. It's a recognition. It's not an accomplishment. It's not it's something that we earn our way to. It's not something that we think our way to. Something that we recognize as already being present. And for some reason, some degree of suffering seems to be almost essential. There can be some exceptions, but there are not that many successful CEOs that are willing to, take a peek into their own emptiness. That movement is for those of us a little more desperate. Something more motivational. If everything's going, swimmingly well for us, everything's just working out, not likely to rock the boat. It's almost when something that jars our sense of what we believe the world is, or how someone else should be in relation to me. When our world gets shaken up, then perhaps we're vulnerable enough to look at it in another way. So I've been saying so far tonight that self-improvement is unrelated to awakening, but there is actually one exception to that. It's unrelated to waking up, but it is related to how that expression of awakeness can happen. Okay, so if let's just say someone is tone deaf and then wakes up, they will be an awake, tone deaf person. It's not like you suddenly have new skills, right? You don't learn to become a musician just because you had an awakening experience. You might afterwards decide to pursue that, but it's not a consequence of waking up, right? So, but where this idea of self-improvement, learning skills along the way has value in terms of awakeness, is how that awakeness is expressed. In other words, if you learned earlier in life to say, express yourself well, then after awakening, whatever you may choose to do at some point afterwards would tend to have a greater effectiveness. If you can express yourself well, it just makes sense. There might be someone else that's equally awake, right? That hadn't learned that skill earlier in life and is unable to express themselves. The awakeness is still perfectly there, but they just don't have that skill set to use it. So that's sort of the one exception where the self-improvement has some benefits in terms of how that awakeness is expressed, and we don't know how that will be. We really don't. Um, because there's this sense of after awakening of uh, for many people not really wanting to do anything. Enough to get by. Yeah, we're not going to be out on the streets probably, but there's a sense of not being motivated by the same personal achieving self that used to drive the ship. Um, so there can be this sense of being content, being fully content, and not really being that motivated, just sort of just really enjoying the contentment, right? And that can last a while, maybe a year or so. Stretch it out as long as you can. And I've talked about this a couple of times before, but it's worth talking about too, because it can be quite a confusing period of, after that honeymoon period, um, there can be a period that has been called in Zen as the winter time of awakening, and it can be a little confusing because there can be that contentment, but it can feel really dry, really stark, really like what happened to the juice? You know that first blush of awakening was so exciting, so wonderful, and now it's just sort of it's nice, everything's good, but just flat, right? Just like it's dark. I remember going through that. Audi used to have retreats out at a place called Asilomar, which is out on the California coast, and it's right on, literally on the beach, and with sand dunes and sort of wind-blown vegetation, but really stark. It was a perfect environment for that. Perfectly reflected what I was feeling, where it was just, it just felt um, like there was to, no apparent way out of that. And the only thing to do, and I think the reason I'm talking about is I think probably some people um, on the talk tonight are or have experienced this or are going through it, is it can feel like there's nothing possible to do to extract oneself from that. And that's true. What is needed is to just let it be. It is um, what I finally realized afterwards is that it was a sense of like fully emptying one's cup, and that can take some time. And the only way for that to pass is just to let it be, let it happen. It's not a bad thing. It's just everything's fine. There's a sense of everything's really good, except really really dry. There's no excitement. There's no juice. There's no hope. There's no all the things that used to inspire us. So that's just worth noting. So when we talk about uh, self-improvement, we can recognize how hard that is. How hard it is to sort of undo habits or change behavior. A lot of work and slow, glacial paced movement. In terms of changes. Um, what what is easier after the recognition of our true being as this awareness is that it's much easier to look back on our conditioning of this body mind and see it for what it is, because it's not essentially who we are. So it's easier just to see it, be present for it, not try to argue with it or justify it or make it less or more, or, just to see it for what it is. And there's something very freeing about that. That sort of liberates those conditioned tendencies, not overnight, but much more quickly than um, we could when we were trying to do it by our own volition. When we have the sort of presence to remain um, available to see it, just see it for what it is. We don't have to try to fix it. That's really the key. Don't fix it. Don't judge it. Just see it. And there's something very transformative about that. And so it's not like these things that we wished were different won't ever change by giving up this, pressure for self-improvement. But they can change in ways that we won't even understand. We won't know how or why it's happening. It's just almost like when we look at it, in the rear view mirror, we see, oh, that tendency that I had a few years back, it doesn't seem to be functioning anymore in a good way. Right? And we might also find ourselves doing things that we didn't know we could do because we didn't have the same identity of self-limiting beliefs. Because awareness doesn't have those. It's just present. Right? So things do change, but they change in quite miraculous ways when we allow them just to be and remain present in a non-judgmental way. And then things can change surprisingly quickly, actually.